Very good. Okay. All right. Shalom. Shalom. Happy Purim also to everybody coming up in just a few hours. Chag Sameach. As we have done every time now, I do want to start with a special psalm for the full and speedy recovery of Rabbi Steinsalz, who is the author of the book we're studying, of course. And as we all know, he had a stroke just about 2 years ago, and thank God he's fully there and present and so on, but his speech, he's still not back. So I want to offer a psalm also, because what we're trying to do through this class is not just pray for him, as we'll soon do, but also to try and, by speaking his words, to try and revive those words and revive his speech at the same time. All right. So we'll say the psalm. Psalm 45 is a psalm I'm saying because this is a psalm also that deals with the prayer for speech, or that speaks about the power of speech. So we'll say this and then we'll get directly to our study. Okay, so we were up to chapter 5, which is the chapter that speaks of Torah. And he started by saying, just to recap very quickly, that the teachings of Torah itself, is not just from heaven, it is heaven. And by studying Torah, we are not just studying Torah to achieve a goal, but the studying of Torah, therefore, is a goal in and of itself, because you connect with the divine. If the Torah is heaven, the Torah is God, so to speak, then by learning Torah, we are connected to God himself. Now, the purpose of this, as he has been saying now in the past paragraph or two, purpose of this is not just to remain there, not just to remain with the connection, but of course to translate the connection into action, because that's the highest level of attainment, of divine attainment. We also spoke about the 4 levels of pleasure, right? Remember, the highest is the level which is a bodily level. There's the level that's like music, a soulful level. But the highest level is the level of action, of doing good. When you do good, the pleasure that brings, not just to you, but to also the person that you're doing good, is that highest level of pleasure. It's also the difference between this level of pleasure and the rest of, or the other levels, is that when one does good, then one has to almost leave his self and go to the other person. The other levels of pleasure are really self-oriented. They deal with me. And therefore, they are also tainted with the me, with the ego. But in any case, the purpose of studying Torah is, again, to translate this divinity into action, because really, if you are one with God by studying Torah, and that oneness leads you to channeling, to channel God in this world. How do you channel God in this world? Mainly through action. Anyhow, so we were speaking about that. This is also included in the big topic of tikkun, rectifying the world through these actions. But we were up to page 69. I know that there are different editions. This book has been tremendously successful, so it's been published many times. Again, it doesn't matter. The paragraph begins with the words, another, more inward aspect is connected with the view that the material world is not inferior. So, speaking of this channeling of God into action by doing good, not just feeling good, we are now continuing to speak about this idea of tikkun, and Rabbi Steinsalz continues by saying the following. Does anyone want to read? Another more inward aspect from those words, that beginning, please. Right. So, of course, this is very powerful and deep, but in a way, what this is saying is that it really connects to the line from the Zohar, the foremost book of Kabbalah, that asks the question, why did God create the world? Why did he create the world? It's the question of questions. And there are many answers to that. But the answer that Kabbalah offers is that God created the world, ki nitava lo yitbarach dira betachtonim. That's what it says, verbatim. Nitava lo, God desired a dwelling place, a dira, a house, an apartment, year down below. Now, that's why God created the world. Does it really answer the question? You tell me. I don't know. But it's God. It's almost like saying to your children, why your children ask you, why do you do this? You say, because I feel like it. Because I'm the president and you're not, as George Bush would say. Right? So what does that mean? God desired to have a house here, down below. Fine. It doesn't really fully explain the question, but it does explain this. And that is that the foremost level in any human being, and especially in God, the foremost depth of a person is his desire. And that's why sometimes desire is illogical. It's beyond reason. And what was God's desire? To have a place here in this world. So in other words, this world is really connected to the deepest part of God, to his desire. And when we do what God wants us to do in this world, we're connecting to his deepest part, to his desire. The desire of God is not in the world of angels. That might be just a technical thing that God had to do. It's not even in the world of the souls. The desire of God is here. So each time we do something that God wants us to do in his house, we beautify his home in this world through good deeds like he's speaking about. We're actually connecting to God's desire, and that's the deepest level of connection with God. And that's why this is saying that, yes, although this is a very materialistic world, it's also the most spiritual world of worlds, because it enables a person to connect to God's desire. Now, it's a paradox, as this last line was saying. Yes, it's very materialistic, and that matter is what obstructs this spirituality. Very often we get lost in this matter, in this material world, and we lose the inner realm of it, right? The realm of that desire. But if we are able to really dig in, yeah, I think it's fascinating, because it's really connected very much to the whole idea of Purim. If there's one message to Purim, what is it? That what you see is not what you get. That's the message of Purim. We think there's a regular story going on with Queen Esther just by coincidence. Well, she was chosen as the next queen, and that it happened to be that Haman just happened to be chosen to parade Mordechai in the streets, if you're familiar with the story, right? So many things that we can say, oh, just coincidence. But they're not. What you see is really not what you get. That's why we dress up on Purim. That's why we eat Hamantashen on Purim. You know, the idea of Hamantashen is, today the Hamantashen are not the same as once upon a time, but the Hamantashen, once upon a time, first of all, only had poppy seeds. Today you have chocolate, you have raspberry, you have blueberries, you have all sorts. But also the Hamantashen had dough covering the poppy seeds completely. Today you have the sweetness of the Hamantashen revealed much more. But why do we eat that on Purim? Because, again, to share this message that all of life is really covered. If you really want to experience sweetness or divine desire in life, then we have to peel that Hamantashen. We have to peel that dough, and then you'll find the sweetness. You have to undress a person who's dressing up. And then you'll find the real soul. And same with the story of Purim. Sometimes circumstances, challenges happen to us, and we don't know why they are happening. But it's just sometimes a question of peeling those challenges and seeing the God in them. Same here with this world. The same paradox here is found in human beings. On the one hand, we are human beings separated from God. On the other hand, we are God. Because your soul, my soul, everyone's soul here is a part of God. So it's not like God is using us, he's using himself. You know, the Baal Shem Tov asked the question, so what if the Zohar says so? That God desired to build this world. It doesn't answer the question. And the Baal Shem Tov says, but that's the whole point. On desires, you can't ask questions, because then you won't find an answer. Al ta'ava lo sho'alim she'elot. That's what the Baal Shem Tov says. On desires, you don't ask questions. If I desire something deeply, again, it's beyond, that desire comes from a place that's beyond rationality. It's almost like the desire we have. I think we have that in relationships, in good relationships. I love just because, not for any other reason. I don't love, if my love is real, it's beyond reason. You know, it's terrible to even give this analogy, but not long ago I saw a documentary about what's his name? Luciano Pavarotti, you know, the great opera singer. And Luciano Pavarotti is a man who, it's terrible, but his answer is the answer that I want to focus on. It's the answer that I like. After 20 years, I think, of marriage, he left his wife for his younger secretary. You familiar with his biography a little bit? And they asked him, she was much, much younger than him also. And they asked him, why did you fall in love with her? And he said, well, if I had an answer, my love would not be love. That was a very clever way of running away from the question. But his point is a real point. It's serious. If I love just because of your beautiful nose, then I don't love you. I love the pleasure that the nose brings me, right? I love myself. But if I love you just because, then I love you. I'm not expecting anything in return. That means I love you. But it's the same here with God. God desired. He loved this world, this vision of this world, and he created this world. Why? Just because. Why did he put us here? Because he loves us. Why? Just because. So in a way, yes, it's beyond rationality, but there's something so beautiful in this also. And our duty really is to uncover this God, to be able to see him even when he's not seen. You know, it reminds me, just not to bore you too much, but there's a beautiful commentary on this biblical story. You know, Moses, of course, faced many, many hardships and challenges in his 40-year journey in the desert with the Jewish people. They complained non-stop, kvetched, and so on. But there was one episode where he actually faced a real rebellion by none other than his own nephew/cousin, Korach. Korach led a rebellion against Moses with 250 men, and other leaders, Datan and Aviram, were also known to be rebellious from the get-go, from Egypt. But God wanted to squash that rebellion, and he asked to perform a miracle for the nation. What miracle? A miracle that would prove who the real leader is. You see, people were saying that Moses and Aaron shouldn't be leaders. So God said to Moses, you know what, assemble the staffs. You remember that biblical story? Assemble the staffs of all of the leaders. Every leader had a staff or a scepter like kings have. Assemble those staffs, line them up. Take Aaron's staff also with you, because I want to prove to everyone that Aaron is the real high priest. Aaron is the leader. And place Aaron's staff, therefore, in the middle of all these staffs. The next morning you will see, God, that only one of these staffs will have blossomed. And the person to whom this staff belongs, that's the person I want as my leader. This will prove it to the nation that really Aaron should be the leader. Fine. The leaders agreed to give their staffs. That night, Moses placed all the staffs on one long table. He placed Aaron's staff in the middle so that they wouldn't think that maybe there's more wind on the sides that making the staff blossom or come up with any excuse. The next morning, lo and behold, of course, the staff of Aaron is the staff that blossomed. And God proved to Moses and to everyone else, especially to this rebellious group, you see, this is the leader that I want. Aaron is the leader. Now, the question that the commentaries ask is, why did God have to prove that Aaron is the leader through this specific miracle? Why couldn't, let's say, a voice come down from heaven and shout to the world, Aaron is my leader? Right? Why this specific miracle? It's an interesting question. And the Kabbalistic take on this is beautiful. It says that God wasn't trying to prove who is the leader. God was trying to prove what is a leader. What is a leader? A leader is someone who sees a dry stick that is completely lifeless, yet can still make it grow. It can still transform death into life, so to speak. That's a real leader. As someone who really sees the soul in everything, sees that which is not seen. That's the power of Purim, that we have to connect to that which is not seen, to that soul, and make it blossom. I think it's true in education a lot, that very often, people give up on themselves. But I was just reading about Einstein. Just an interesting fact, I don't want to deviate too much, but not many people know this, but apparently Einstein had a mentor who really saved his psychological state as a young man. He was a very young teenager, 13, 14, 15, and this man was introduced to Einstein. It was Einstein's tutor. His name was Max Talmud. He was, by the way, an observant Jew. And he taught Einstein also to put on tefillin every day and so on. Einstein, during one period of his life, was actually very observant. He kept kosher, put tefillin and so on, thanks to this Max Talmud. Max Talmud is the first one to tell Einstein, look, the world, Einstein was called slow, mentally disabled and so on. He was the first one to tell him, no, I think you have a talent in science, you should explore it. So yeah, you had Aaron, right? A high priest. When everyone saw a dead staff in Einstein, there was one person who really saved him. And by saving him, of course, contributed so much to society. I think that's why just to finish the thought, that's why it's interesting because the Kabbalists point this out also. The word for staff that's used, especially in this biblical episode, is mateh. The word for staff in Hebrew is mateh. Now they point out that mateh is actually the exact same word as the word mitah, which means a bed on which you sleep, right? Just mitah is a yud, mateh doesn't have a yud, but you can spell it without a yud because you just need a chirik under the mem, mitah. What's the connection between a bed and a staff, a dry staff? Why the same word for both nouns? And the answer is really beautiful. What's a bed? When you see someone sleeping on a bed, if you come from outside this world, you might see someone that looks dead. He's sleeping. But really, he's going through this renewal stage. And same here, what is a mateh of a real leader? Something that seems dry. But really, there's so much life there. And it will blossom if you really believe in it. That's the correlation between the two. And I think it's a message that's powerful, especially for our generation, really. Very often we lose trust in ourselves or in others. And we have to be able to see dry, we see that with teenagers. I have teenagers. So they seem so indifferent, so dry, so dead in their comportment. But really, it's like trees in the winter, right? Trees in the winter also seem dead, but they're just conserving energy for the next season. And I think in a way that's what we have to see. To be high priest, you need to be Esther's. Esther, the name Esther means that, hiding. There's something much deeper hiding. And by the way, when she was able to tap into that thing that was much deeper, that's when she transformed herself and her people. Esther is a person who, just saying this because it's connected to Purim, but it's a person who was almost forced to become a candidate for the next queen. Just imagine being in Esther's shoes. Imagine this. Here is a king, a crazy king who just murdered his ex-wife. According to the Midrash, Vashti was murdered. And now he's looking for a new wife. Would you go and stand in line and say, hey, I'll be your next wife, knowing that he had just murdered his wife? Like, what are you thinking? Mordechai, though, is telling Esther, you better go. And Esther, of course, is hesitant. She doesn't want to go. And in fact, part of the reason she didn't beautify herself like all of the other candidates is because she didn't want to be there. She didn't want to go. But once she learned to tap into her inner power, to be that queen and to do that, those wonders for the Jewish people, when she wasn't hidden anymore, she wasn't Esther, she was Hadassah also, which means, by the way, also a myrtle that blossoms. Then she was able to really make a change for the Jewish people and for the world. But that's the big idea here, that God's desire really is hiding in every atom of our creation, and it's our duty really to uncover it. So look, Rabbi Yitzchak Luria speaks a lot about this klippa, right? Which is really what this is speaking about, this peel. That's what it's called, this matter that obscures the spirit. And he asked the question really of why was it created? Well, that's because we're on a mission in this world, and we're not angels. If these challenges would not exist, if everything would come so easily, so robotically, then really there would be no purpose in this world. And there would be no purpose in our creation too. Right? It's like giving a 1 + 1 = 2 test to an Einstein. What's the point? So in order for us really to grow and to make ourselves not only grow, but make ourselves also ascend to a higher level, our souls ascend to a higher level, then we have to face these obstacles. Then God had to make it hard. And how did God make it hard? By creating all of these obscurities. There's another concept by Rabbi Moshe Chaim Luzzatto, who was a 1700 sage known for some of his Musar books, Derech Hashem and others. But Rabbi Moshe Chaim Luzzatto evokes this Talmudic concept called Nahama de Kisufa. If we've spoken about this once. Nahama de Kisufa means the bread of embarrassment. And what he says is that if I give you a gift and just out of nowhere, for no reason, your automatic natural response is, you're embarrassed. I don't deserve this, right? Why are you giving me a gift? So same year, if God had given us the gift of putting us in the Garden of Eden directly without going through this world, then we would have been embarrassed. Now, because the Garden of Eden is an eternal world, we would have been eternally embarrassed. So what does God do? He sends us to this world with all of these obstacles. And then we feel like we deserve the gift of the Garden of Eden, and then we can be there without any embarrassment. That's his concept. Nahama de Kisufa. But that's another way of looking at it. But what they say here in this country is what doesn't break you makes you stronger. So in a way, these obstacles make you stronger spiritually. It's interesting because you do have two opposite worlds, spirit and matter. But when you combine them together, they create divinity. It's interesting that God wanted to reside, look, we're facing the Kotel here. He wanted to reside in Temple Mount, just behind the Kotel, in a very physical place. Because God was saying that when earth and heaven kiss, so to speak, when matter and spirit merge, that's where I reside. Why? It's a whole other question. But just going back to your point, I think that our ability to transform matter into something spiritual, to take our skills and talents and use them in order to really elevate this world, better this world, make this world divine, is exactly what enables us to draw God down to this world, to make God dwell in every one of our workshops, in every one of our deeds, of the things that we do through our skills and talents. It's that merge of spirit and matter, these two opposite worlds, that really creates a resting place for God. Again, because God's desire is to come to that. We just have to let him in, be that channel, to come to those works of art, to come to those things that are very materialistic, yet that we make them through allowing God in, we make them spiritual. Remind me also that I remember, maybe I've shared this, but asking a pianist once a long time ago, when does she consider the peak of a performance? And she replied so powerfully, she said, when I'm not present. You feel that way? When I'm not present. And that's when you almost enable God to just take over. And you're not present. You're just a utensil. You're just a vessel for God's light. And I think, why is that? Because of exactly what we're speaking about. God desires to be in a very measured, in a very even physical, materialistic space. But he wants us to make space for him there. And when we do, that's when God resides fully. That's where God says, you know what, I'm here. And that's the idea, I think he spoke about this in the chapter of the soul. But that's the idea of the Holy of Holies. The holiest place in the temple, where God really dwelled fully, unreservedly, was the Holy of Holies. Now, in the Holy of Holies, you had something that speaks a little bit about that, something that was also a paradox, because on the one hand, you had to have the ark there in the Holy of Holies as per God's instruction. Now, the ark had specific measurements, and if you measured the measurements of the ark, it could not fit in the Holy of Holies, technically. It just didn't fit. The Holy of Holies was too small for that ark, yet it fit. Now, how do you explain that? Because, of course, it's the Holy of Holies, but in a way, I think it represents just that God wants to dwell in a very measured place. And when he dwells in that very measured place, it breaks the measurements. And each time, I think, we engage with this world, each in our own way, in a very measured way, but also in a very spiritual way, allowing God to come in, then it creates a Holy of Holies in every one of our deeds. This is the paradox that he's speaking about here, but it's a paradox that creates a dwelling place for God. So let's continue just a little bit more here. Matter is a sort of standing wave. I think that's where we are, right? Does anyone want to read? By the way, we see a manifestation of that. It's beautiful about Judaism that it doesn't see matter as an enemy. This world is not your enemy. It can be your enemy if you use it in the wrong way. But if you use it in the right way, it can become your greatest friend, because it can do that which no other world can do. It can draw down God. Matter can draw down God. Other things can't draw down the full spirit of God. God dwells, he calls this world his home. It's just like a king. A king can be in his palace, he can come to his office, but you don't see his very essence there. He comes to work. Where is he fully at? Where does he manifest his full self? At home, in his bedroom maybe. And I think in a way that's what this world is. This world of matter helps God manifest himself fully. This is his room, his bedroom. It's not his palace. It's his dira, like the Zohar says. Now, we see that in a way because it's interesting. In the Torah, most of the 630 mitzvot are very physical, very materialistic. Giving tzedakah, there's nothing more materialistic than giving tzedakah. Yet, that penny that you're giving is also the holiest item in the world. Why? Because you're using it to do a mitzvah, to do that which God commanded, that which God desires. Same with every other mitzvah. Now, other worlds are envious of that. The angels see that and they tremble. That's why it has a halakhic implication. When you go into a cemetery, you know that you're supposed to, I wear my tzitzit out a little bit. You're supposed to tuck them in. Why? Because the souls of those that are buried are no longer able to perform this mitzvah that they so desire. And if they see me in the cemetery walking around with tzitzit, they'll be jealous. And I can't make them jealous, so I have to tuck in my tzitzit. That's by the way, Jewish law, code of Jewish law. It's not some Kabbalistic book. This is halakha. Now, why am I saying this? Because you see, even the worlds of the souls are envious of our ability to use matter to create the greatest light, to draw down the greatest holiness. Strings are strings. It's made out of wool, right? It's not anything special, but it can become special if you use it for mitzvah. What I'm saying is this. So souls, no doubt, exist forever. Our souls, live forever. And the cemetery, where they buried is usually their point of connection to this world. That's why you visit a person's grave, especially at a yard site, because that's their channel to this world. Now, on the other hand, souls are souls. They can't perform any mitzvah. Mitzvahs are given specifically to human beings with flesh and blood in this world, like we're speaking about. And in a way, they are jealous, like we just said, right? They are, in a way, regretful that they didn't perform all the mitzvahs they could have performed. One of the great Hasidic rabbis, the Kotzker Rebbe, would say that a person would know how much he or she would regret the time wasted in this world in not doing all of these good deeds. They would launch themselves in doing good deeds all the time, 24/7. But it's true, because when a person dies, then he has no body to do all these mitzvot. And then he says, gosh, I should have done more. In that world, I can't. In this world, I could connect to God's foremost desire. I could really do that which God wants me to do. I could connect to God in the deepest way. And those worlds know. I'm in the palace, it's nice, but I'm not in his home with him together as one. There's a dual responsibility, right? Not just of parents encouraging their children, even from up, or not just parents and children, family members, friends, mentors. Doesn't have to be biologically related even, but you have that dual responsibility of encouraging people, even from the upper world. Sometimes, you hear stories of dreams, stories of signs and things like that, to follow the right path. But you also have the responsibility from the other end, right? That's why we say Kaddish, because we really believe that Kaddish, it's symbolism, and moreover, good deeds that we do. I've always wondered, if you read the Yizkor prayer, which is the prayer for the deceased, we say Yizkor Elokim, may God remember, and then we say the name of our beloved ones, and then we say Ba'avur she notvim tzedakah ba'ad askarat ishmato, which means, why God? Why should you remember in the merit of me contributing to charity in His loving memory, His or her loving memory? And I've always wondered I know that Jews are good at fundraising, but now during this somber moment, you're going to fundraise. You're going to ask a person, you're going to insert it in the prayer and say, because I'm contributing to charity, therefore God will remember. Can't you leave charity for once out of the picture? This is a very intimate moment with your loved ones. Charity, speaking of, but the big idea is connected again to the idea of the Kaddish. What we're doing is that, no, we're saying that our good deeds, we're communicating this message. Our good deeds in this world, in loving memory of a soul, of someone that we love, brings so much pleasure, brings true nachas, as they say, to the soul. So when we give charity, and a person, as the soul that we're connected to, and that we're giving charity and loving memory of, sees us giving that charity, it's just filled with nachas, filled with pleasure. So there's that dual responsibility, right? Yes, children towards their parents and vice versa, or again, it doesn't have to be that type of relationship, but any other type of relationship, close relationship. So you have the Kaddish, you have those good deeds, the charity that's given. But that's that. Now, all of this, again, it brings tremendous pleasure. Part of the reason is because of what we're saying, because they can't do it. They can't give charity anymore. They're in the world of souls. Only us. The Baal Shem Tov says, in the same vein, but he says he wishes that people would kiss their own children with the same fervor as they kiss a Sefer Torah, a Torah scroll. Because the children themselves, and tanks or objects that are used for divine purposes are just as holy, maybe even holier than the Torah scroll. They are, if they allow God in, and children of course do, then they are holier than anything. Beautiful, yeah. There's, it's interesting. Just to again, this is from the Shla Hakadosh, Shnei Luchot HaBrit. That was his nickname, but his name was Rabbi Shlomo Horowitz. He was the chief rabbi of Prague in the 1500s. He says something quite interesting, by the way. Rabbi Horowitz, most Horowitzes in the world are related to him. I don't know if there's no Horowitz here. No Horowitz. No. By the way, Horowitz is also the same as Gorevich, because with the Russian pronunciation, the Hey sometimes is turned into a Ga. So Gorowitz is also related to Horowitz. It's interesting. I'm saying that because Horowitz has a whole commentary on the whole Torah, but he has other writings. One of his writings is his will. In his will, he asked all of his descendants never to eat turkey. So they can't really celebrate Thanksgiving fully, because they can't eat turkey. Why? It's a mystery. Maybe because he didn't trust the shochets, the slaughterers of Turkey in Prague, where he lived. I don't know. I really don't know why. But until today, I know many Horowitzes that don't eat turkey. They related to him. They don't eat turkey because of that. It's interesting because he makes the point of also focusing on the Hebrew word for materialism. There's multiple Hebrew words. Well, the word he uses is gashmiut, right? Gashmiut means materialism, physicality. There's an expression like that in Hebrew when you want to say someone is like very coarse, materialism, megusham meod. You say it, same. But he says it's interesting that the word for gashmiut is also the word for rain, geshem. Even though they are two opposites. Rain is God's ultimate blessing, right? It comes from God. That's rain. And then Gashmiut is like materialism. And this is exactly what Rabbi Steinsalz is talking about. Gashmiut can be Geshem. It depends on you. If you allow God to come into that Gashmiut, then it becomes Geshem. Then it becomes a blessing of the highest order. Learn. He says most people really have to unlearn. To unlearn all that is blocking you from really connecting. And it's true. By the way, that's also connected to Purim. We say that on Purim one has to get drunk to the point that which means that until you don't know, you have to get drunk to the point that you can't even say blessed is who, Mordechai or Haman? Cursed is who, Mordechai or Haman? You don't even know. That's the level of your drunkenness. Now, what's the idea? The idea is really in order to reveal that which is hidden, like we spoke about at the very beginning, right? To reveal that spark of God, and one has to get out of the way, like exactly he's saying. Put your knowledge aside. You have to get drunk. Not necessarily on wine. It doesn't say you have to get drunk on wine. You can get drunk on God. As I said, it doesn't have to be on wine. Hannah, the biblical character who prayed to have a son for many years, and until a point where the high priest thought, when she came to pray in the tabernacle, she thought that she was drunk because she was whispering. But she said to the high priest, "Shikorani velo miyain," I am drunk, but not from wine. You have to get drunk on wine. Get drunk on wine. But the point is that it's almost like the Zohar says, "Tachlita yediah shelo leida," that the goal of knowledge is to not know, because the more you know, the more you realize that you don't know. But the more you realize that it's not you that knows; it's only God that knows. You really don't know anything. And then you have to make space for him. I'll just conclude by reconnecting all of this to Purim, because it's interesting to note, when did the redemption of the Jewish people really begin? It began when Esther assumed her role as the savior of the Jewish people. And she said to Mordecai, she was hesitant at first, I'll go see the king and ask him to annul the decree of Haman, even though this might I might be risking my life, because not even me as a queen, as his wife, is not allowed to enter without permission. And then she says something. She says to Mordecai, I will go. And then we'll read this tonight and tomorrow. And then she says, V'chasher avadeti, avadeti. And as I will perish, I will perish. If I have to perish, I'll perish. And then she goes, and then redemption begins. But Kabbalists point this out. Exactly what we're saying is that when does redemption begin? When you say to yourself, my me, my ego, avadeti, has to get lost. When you say Kasher avadeti avadeti, then the miracle of Purim in your own life begins. It's not about you. Thank you. Happy Purim, everybody.